This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Discussions at the Roundtable. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Dr. David Williams. Dr. Williams owns David T. Williams & Associates and has over 40 years of experience in the water resources industry. He is a renowned, sought-after expert in sedimentation engineering and hydraulic and hydrologic design, and is the author of over 100 technical papers. Dr. Williams holds professional engineering licenses in 11 states and certifications in hydrology, floodplain management, erosions and sediment control, and more. And he holds a PhD from Colorado State. Dr. Williams, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Noah, for having me.
Of course. Let's jump into it. Tell me about your firm and how you got into the water resources industry.
Well, it was quite by accident. What it was is that there was a litigation in Hawaii, which makes my eyes perk out when I said, "Oh, Hawaii," and they were interested in having a expert testify in relationship to flooding in a suburb of Honolulu. So, but they couldn't find anybody to be an expert witness for them because the client were a bunch of homeowners trying to buy out their houses, and the defendants were one of the 6 primary families that initially settled Hawaii. They were religious families. They were, and so no one wanted to go up against them, and so they had to go out of state. And so I was contacted. Said, "Do you have expertise in water resources? We need you. Could you help us?" I said, "Okay, well, that sounds like fun." I probably wouldn't have accepted if it wasn't for Hawaii.
Was that call completely out of the blue, or were you looking for expert witness engagements?
No, I was not looking at all. It just came to me.
Obviously, when you get that call, it's a vetting process, but it's a two-way vetting process. You're vetting them and they're vetting you. You're deciding if you want to do it. You told me before the show in an email that your philosophy in accepting clients is that winning or losing isn't really part of your calculus. What fundamentally do you look for?
Well, I don't try to make a decision if they're at fault or not at fault, if they're plaintiffs or defendants. I just like to see do they need someone to help explain the science to the jury and the judge such that they can have a credible case and that their side is represented properly. I don't look to win or lose because that's not what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to find how many accolades or wins that you have. This is not part of expert witness, and I see too much of that in my industry that I see. I see opposing experts doing whatever they can to win. Well, no, don't do that to try to win. Just to explain the science behind it all so that the jury and the judge are the ones who decides who, quote, wins or loses, because you should not have a stake in it. And in fact, I pointed out this in my little short course that I do on expert witness, that it's illegal to have a contingency as part of your fee as if you win or lose. Like they say, okay, if you win this case, you get a big bonus. Well, that's illegal in all states. It's illegal. And sometimes the attorneys try to pressure that against you. Because I've had it several times, 3 times, where the attorney didn't get as much as he wanted. And so he says, "David, this last bill, I want to cut it in half because I didn't get as much as I wanted." And so I would say, "Hold it. Isn't that against the law in your state?" Oh, okay. Only if they find out.
Let's pivot to ethics for a moment then. That's really interesting. Is this something that you've come across a lot where attorneys are trying to, I don't want to say, directly tell you to say something or do something that you shouldn't, but kind of nudge you in a particular direction that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with?
Well, you got to understand, you're not there to win, but the attorneys are there to win, right?
Sure.
That's their objective is winning. And so they will do everything they can. And of course, they'll try to weasel word you in terms of trying to say something like, if you say probably, could you possibly say possibly? Or could you say most likely? And I've had them try to urge me to say something like that. And I may change it only to my comfort level. But long as it does not change the meaning of what I'm saying, it doesn't it doesn't twist the truth. And that's what I look for, because you got to be honest, you got to be ethical about all this stuff. And I see too much of that in other expert witnesses. And I'm not saying they're all that way. Some of them are great expert witnesses, and I love to work with them. But the point is that yes, attorneys will try very hard for you to slant your words, slant your report, slant your testimony to favor their side. And you have to learn to be aware of this and be able to fight back. Not fight back as the word, but more is to resist that temptation.
So you advocate kind of for a more proactive approach with your attorney?
Yes, I tell them ahead of time that, first of all, that I teach a half-day short course on how to be an expert witness. So one of the things I emphasize is being an ethical, responsible, and also a caring person. And I tell them then that I'm a fairly seasoned in this, and don't try to force me into a corner, which I may rear back at you and tear your face off. So don't do that. I used to be a special forces in the Army, by the way.
So yeah, this is already in your blood, huh?
Yes. I was in the 7th Special Forces during Vietnam, which kind of dates me. It was the Green Berets.
Absolutely, of course. So let's talk about that preparation. You teach a course on this. What preparation techniques that you find to be the most effective in report writing and depositions and cross-examination? What works? And importantly, what doesn't work? What are the things that attorneys have tried that aren't particularly effective with, especially newer expert witnesses?
Yeah, well, the first thing you got to do is you got to realize that expert witness job is different from doing a regular project. And so you got to make sure that you are very, very organized. You tell your subordinates that are going to be working with you that this is the case, that you have confidentiality. You got to put things in a separate folder. When you send emails, you got to double check things. Put your emails in a special folder for that case, so
Sure.
that when you're asked to present under discovery all the correspondence related to that, you can just go straight to that folder instead of having to go search through all your emails. So that's a part of the preparation of doing that. Also, you've got to be real thorough about getting the background of the information. So that's a good start. And sometimes I do it myself. Sometimes I have my assistants. I have a senior engineer that helps me on this stuff. So you got to be organized. So what you do is you sit down first thing, says, okay, what are the issues? What are the data sources to get the information about and then also what are the types of evidence that are out there? First of all, things like, okay, newspaper articles. Maybe there was a helicopter, the local TV station had a helicopter and took videos of the flooding. Say, I'm a water resources engineer, so maybe that's available. If the other side is a public entity, they may have documents on such as maintenance manuals, operation procedures, how to operate a reservoir, let's say, when you have additional information. So we lay down there and said, okay, what are the data sources? And you go after that data source, I go after this data source, and then we come back together on that. So organization, we'll find out your data sources, and then also make sure you got the whole part of it. So one of the things I found out sometimes is that the attorney on your side will not necessarily lie to you, but they will hide things from you because it's prejudicial against their case. And they don't want you to know it. Well, it may affect your analysis, because nothing worse than making a declaration and thing and find out that he had earlier had another expert saying something exactly opposite, and he didn't like it. And so that's why he got rid of that person and got you. But you didn't know it. He was not going to tell anybody. But it's got to be discovered if that's what he did.
So that's part of that proactive approach. You have to ask your attorney, for the complete documents and the complete situation that you're in. Do you find yourself in situations sometimes where you wish the attorney had brought you in earlier in the case so you had more time to find these sorts of things out?
Almost every time. Almost every time I wish that they would have gotten me early. I've had it where one says, I have to go to trial in 3 weeks, something like that. I said, my gosh, and I need a report tomorrow, type of thing. And I'm going to go on a cruise for 10 days. And so that's happened to me way, way too many times. That they never have ever. I've been involved in about 50 cases. I've never had them contact me too early, ever. Always too late, it seems. And I chastise them on it, and they have their various reasons why they wait till just at the end. They said, "Well, we thought we were going to settle, and we didn't want to hire you and have to pay your retainer, then find out we aren't going to use you." Well, I can understand that, but it's going to prejudice against me doing a good quality job for you if you're going to do something like that.
With the reports, do you typically get some kind of a skeletal outline, or are you mainly developing reports whole cloth?
Well, I have a tendency to do it as in terms of a dialogue. I use, because what it is that the reports as an engineer or a scientist we're used to are doing scientific type or engineering type of reports.
Sure.
This type of report is not for engineers and scientists. It's for the court system, whether it be a jury is going to review it later on, the other attorney is going to review it, your own attorney, because they got to know what you're doing, and then also the possible judge, because they're all going to be reading part of it or whatever, or digesting part of it. And so if I wrote a report like I would do an engineering report, that would just kind of not necessarily go over their head, but it would be confusing and whatever. So I lay it out as a tale. I'm telling a story, and so then as I get to a certain part of the story, I'll make sure that I put in a reference to the proper source that I got that information for. And so that's part of the reference. So I have the references. Okay, now I observed this and this happened, and this supported by this source that I got off of the internet, or because of a report that was made by this university on this incident or something like that. So I do it more as a narrative, and then I step back and make sure that I covered all the bases, and then I go back and see, look at it in terms of a scientific or engineering basis to make sure that I've, said what I want to say, presented my sources, and made a forceful conclusion, which is what you do in a regular engineering report anyway. However, I want to make sure that I do this in a more lay way also. But also, like I said, I know that I start off like doing this on a narrative. And that's, I think, best works for everybody. And therefore, anybody can read it. Anybody can read that.
With such a large body of work and technical papers that you've written over the years, in addition to expert reports, which are discoverable, do you ever worry about getting impeached on something that you may have said a long time ago on a particular topic that maybe something's changed, or maybe the laws changed, or maybe engineering itself has changed?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
I don't worry about it too much because I try to stay very logical. Physics don't change over time.
Sure.
Right. So they don't change over time. Laws of nature don't change over time. And so as long as I'm truthful during that time, and I'm not being biased during that time that I wrote that report or wrote that opinion paper or white paper, and I've done many of those there, I just make sure that I do just look back upon them and say, okay, did I impeach myself, you might say, from earlier things that I'm saying now versus what I said earlier. And I don't think I've ever found, I say, I said this in my report now, but I said something contrary to that back in 2018 or something like that. I've never found that because, look, I don't try to change laws of physics.
Right. Similarly, you were talking about how some expert witnesses maybe aren't quite up to snuff, but you also told me not to, in one of your emails, you said not to trash talk other expert witnesses. So how do you take a proactive role and make sure that your attorney is aware that the other side is getting something wrong without it kind of devolving into fisticuffs?
Yeah, what it is that you discuss with your attorney the basis of your opinion, the laws of physics that are based upon your opinion, and then you present the other side, says, look, here's where they have that wrong. I tell this to my own attorney. This is where they're going, but I'm not going to trash them because we have a disagreement, because he probably got a PhD also, professional licenses, all those type of things. So what I do in trial or even deposition is when they say, well, Dr. So-and-so said this is contrary to what you said. And then what I say is, general, this, Mr. So-and-so or Dr. So-and-so, I may or may not know them. I say, I've read his report, I can understand his logic, but in this case, I just disagree with his assumptions and disagree with his conclusions based upon those assumptions. So those assumptions are different, contrary to mine and different from mine, but we come from different aspects of it. But I respect his opinion, but I think he's wrong.
Do you frequently find yourself across the table from people that you know?
Oh, yes. I had one where the person across the table was my mentor. How's that? So, yes, what you do is, that's one of the things I talk about is before you accept an assignment in my class, I say, find out who the experts are on the other side if they're willing to disclose them there. And then if you find them out, what they are, you got to decide, can I be emotionally detached from that? Can I be objective with that? Is this someone, maybe the other side is someone like your nemesis, right? Can you be rational about your analysis and then don't go after them in a vengeance or something like that? So I say you've got to sit back and ask yourself those questions. Can I be objective? Can I be fair? Can I be, I don't know, nice? I guess is the word.
I've heard this a lot from expert witnesses, far more than I would have expected. It's interesting to me that experts have found themselves in a position where they've been on the opposite side of the table from an attorney, and then that attorney ends up wanting to engage them because they did such a good job defending against their position. Is that a situation that you found yourself in?
Yes, I did some work against the county of Los Angeles. They were doing some bad things to my client, and after my deposition, not deposition and trial, because that's one of the few trials that. That was one of the few cases that went to trial. Only about 1 out of 10 go to trial, and I testified, and I did some analogies, and it went well. And what they did is that they awarded the case to my side and gave 4 times punitive damages.
Wow.
4 times.
Wow.
4 times, which is almost unheard of. And as I was walking out the door, the attorney, the other side's attorney, asked for my business card and says, maybe we may call upon you on another case.
That's got to feel good.
Yeah, kind of. But what got him was that he was an engineer himself before he became an attorney. And what happened is that he thought that he knew the subject matter because he was an engineer. What could be so simple about hydrology and hydraulics? It should be very simple because I had soil mechanics. Well, yeah, soil mechanics is kind of a tough stuff, but he thought that he would know everything. Well, I did technical circles around him because he did not prepare himself because he thought he knew it all because he was indeed an engineer. But hydrology and hydraulics is an intricate type of science. And so he was at fault that he lost his case.
That's interesting. Let's talk about what it means to be an expert. You have a very long list of credentials and certifications. Do you recommend that newer experts find a niche, or do you think that it's better to be a generalist when you're talking about these super complex areas of engineering, for example, that you're in?
Well, I try to stay focused on water resources engineering. And then there's water resources engineering, which is part of civil engineering. Civil engineering is one of the largest disciplines within engineering. You got
Sure.
mechanical, industrial, and things, but civil engineering, there's probably as many civil engineering practitioners as all the other engineering combined. That just shows you how big it is. Like, for instance, the American Society of Civil Engineers has 150,000 members. So that's a lot of engineers. So I try to stay within water resources. Now, even within water resources, I stay focused within that one. For instance, water resources can involve things such as water treatment plants, right? Well, I don't do that, all right? Irrigation, I don't do that. And I do rivers and reservoirs, levees, erosion control, things of that sort. So I stay within that. And now about a third of my inquiries I refuse or turn down, saying that that's related to water resources, you're right, but that's not my area of expertise. And I hate to see work go sometimes, but the worst thing I could do is be a disservice to that side, that attorney.
So in general, it sounds to me like you're saying it's best to focus in on some amount of a niche and become like a super expert in that particular area.
No, not really. You don't have to be a super expert to be a expert witness.
Oh, okay.
I don't think you have to be a super expert, because when you present your stuff, you aren't doing second degree equations or anything like that in front of the jury or anything like that. So you're not doing that. You just got to make a complex situation into a simple story. Because it's not those engineers and scientists that's going to be on the jury.
Right.
Maybe not, but they're not. They're not going to be the majority of it. So you got to be a storyteller and not tell stories, but talk like a story.
A good communicator, in other words.
Yeah, there you go. Good communicator. And so you don't have to be. You should. Someone asked me after one of my workshops on that. Said, "Well, what are your credentials? And how many years of experience should you have to be an expert witness?" And I says, well, I think a minimum of 20 years of working experience. That should hopefully that you've learned your stuff sufficiently that you can be cognizant of it and you understand all the nuances of it. Now, you don't have to be on the cutting edge research on that topic. See, so if civil engineering is the wide topic, especially water resources, I do a wide variety of hydraulics, a little bit of meteorology, hydraulics, runoff analysis, reservoir operation, erosion control, stream bank protection, levee design, all those type of things are involved in that. But there are parts of water resources I don't get into. So you don't have to be what I would consider an expert on it, because after a while, and I've seen this happen before, the attorney would at trial would start reading your resume to the jury, and I can see their eyes rolling back. There's a point after the fifth or sixth title or fifth or sixth letters after your name, their eyes start rolling back, and so you're not really gaining any credibility of that. I mean, so I have over about 150 references. Okay, now if I could get away with 50 if I wanted to, because all they see is, well, that guy has written a lot and probably presented to a lot of people in front of peers, and must be pretty good to be able to do that kind of stuff. So what I say is when I answer that, I say, well, 20 years experience and a good working knowledge, not a cutting edge, a good working knowledge of the fundamentals and some of the nuances of that topic. And then you should be loaded for bear to be good expert witness, because you do not, one of the worst, I found the worst experts that I've seen on the other side, professors. Because there's several reasons. They have a tendency to talk down to people. Because why? They're talking to their students, right? And they have a tendency to talk down to them. And they've been in the ivory tower for 20, 30 years. and they're not used to somebody objecting to what they say, or saying that, well, somebody else has a different, Dr. Williams has a different opinion about that, and he thinks it's this, this, and this. What do you think about that? And then all of a sudden, someone, you're disputing what I said. That's like a student saying, Dr. So-and-so, that equation you wrote on the board is wrong. Well, they never had that happen before. And so they freeze up, they get condescending, and things of that sort. So stuff. But I'm not saying that, that all are like that, but a lot of them I've seen that way. But some really credible professors that know how to tell a story.
Right.
They're hard to beat. They're hard to beat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've had a few of them myself, and they're the ones that I remember the most.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. I had a colleague named Daryl Simons. He was about 10, 20 years older than me. He was a master. He was kind of like your grandfather. All right. And he had a PhD from Colorado State, where I went to, and wrote a lot of books as a leading scientist in the field of water resources engineering. But what was devastating about him is that he put on that grandfather hat, with a big pipe in his mouth, and playing the old grandfather role. And boy, was he good at that. Oh, was he good at that.
One of the things that you advocate for is variety. Tell me about the advantages of a diverse client base that includes, plaintiffs, defendants, et cetera.
Yeah, one of the first things they do, I found out during trial, is that they'll look at your resume and go over the cases that you've been involved in, and they would say, was that for the plaintiff or the defendant? Were they deep pockets or shallow pockets? They would ask that kind of stuff, And I've made a conscious effort to make sure that I get a good mix, 50-50, of plaintiffs and defendants, clients with deep pockets, let's say like a flood control district or a state, or even I've been even up against the federal government, which supposedly have deep pockets, but against them, and then also some homeowners which don't have deep pockets. So what you want to show is a variety, and so then that you don't come across to the jury or the judge as a hired gun, right? This guy always goes for the ones that have the deep pockets. See, you always go for the states. You always defend the states. You always defend the feds. You always defend the flood control district. You always defend the cities. All deep pockets. But how come you never go against don't you believe in justice? Don't you think that there's justice to be served for a person that maybe a group of 5 homeowners that got flooded? Don't you think that they deserve your expertise? No, they make it sound like, well, no, I don't do that because they don't have enough money. So that's what they try to do. The opposite, or the opposing attorney will try to do everything in their powers to lower you in the eyes of the jury, which is a hired gun is one of them.
Is that a fairly common tactic that you've come across?
Yes, very often. About half the time I see that, where they try to not degrade you, but
kind of pigeonhole you a little bit.
Yeah, pigeonhole you, lower you in the eyes of the jury or the judge, and they'll try that. And that's one of the things I say in my presentations is, you gotta have a thick skin to do this stuff.
Sure.
Because they'll come out and say, "Do you realize in 8th grade you got a C in science?" They'll do all sorts of things like that. I had where I was doing litigation in Arizona, and I was doing a presentation up in Flagstaff for the Floodplain Management Association on how to be an expert witness. Right. Well, what happened was that the entity that was on the other side sent 2 of their attorneys to my class to see if they can trip me up, intimidate me, because he said, well, I'd say, everybody, would you please stand up and introduce yourself and who do you work for and why are you here? They stood up and says, we're so-and-so from so-and-so and so-and-so associates, and we're here to see what you have to say. And they were looking for anything they could find that would be illegal or bad advice that they could come back to on the trial or whatever, whatever, in arbitration or whatever, and just make me look bad as possible. So wow. Can you imagine the cost of 2 attorneys driving 4 hours each way to sit in on my presentation, which is a half a day. So you can imagine the cost of that. But they thought that maybe they could catch me.
That's unbelievable. Do you have any specific strategies that you recommend for newer attorneys to kind of keep their calm and keep their cool in those situations? Maybe not when there's attorneys driving out to try and catch them in the act, but during a testimony or cross-examination, for example. Do you think, as an example, that mock cross-examinations are useful for that?
To tell you the truth, I've never had, other than my attorney, mock cross-examine me. I never had another different attorney ask me questions like in a mock trial or something like that. And I've been involved in cases that were like hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. And you think they would spend some money to do a mock trial or something like that, but they never did. And so I don't know the value of it. So I've never been in one, but I talked to my attorney and try to do a secret sign that if I'm in a trial or deposition, that tells you something's not right. Something's not right. So what it may be something like I might scratch my forehead or something like that, which I normally don't do. And so that means then that alerts the attorney that something's amiss. Things are not going properly, or there's an avenue that maybe that it's going to be bad for our side. And so then they said, well, it's about 11 o'clock. Should we have a lunch break now? Or something like that. Or I have can we have a restroom break or lunch or anything of this sort? So, and that's one of the things I also preach about is that when doing this, you should always have a weak bladder and hard of hearing. And so the weak bladder is, Your Honor, can we have a restroom break? Because you may be getting in trouble. You need to talk to your attorney. And the other one is hard of hearing is because a lot of times you're asked a question which it throws you for it, but you don't want to seem shocked. And so what you do is, oh, I didn't quite hear that. Could you please repeat that for me? Of what you've heard it the first time. You heard it the first time, but your mind is figuring out how to answer this while they're doing the question back against you. So that's why I say have a weak bladder and be hard of hearing.
I like the hand signal idea. It's kind of like a catcher and a pitcher, right? Like sending what the next pitch is going to be.
There was a movie with Robert Redford and whoever that the thing was they rubbed their nose. That was the signal. You remember that? I don't know.
No, I've never seen that one, but that's great.
Yeah, that's what they did. They were doing scams, and that was one of the signals is they rubbed their nose like this, and that told them that something was going off.
Do you have any stories, any cases that you can talk about that fundamentally changed or reinforced the way that you approach expert witnessing, just in general?
In general, well, I think I wrote this about these two attorneys that hated each other. They were opposite sides. I was aghast at the way they behaved. I always thought that you can be stiff. Attorneys can be really stiff and very formal. You think it's a very formal thing. Well, it is. It's a very serious thing, but there is levity in that. Mm-hmm. Like for instance, one of them was a case I did in Hawaii. I was up on the witness stand, and it was a flooding case. And I just before me, my side had a widow that cried through her testimony, saying that this flooding that was caused by the other side caused me to lose all my memorabilia about my deceased husband, all my pictures, all his stuff I lost from this flood because of this action. She was crying and had the jury crying. All right. So then I came up after that, and they said, Dr. Williams, my side said this, Dr. Williams, you don't seem like a Williams. Williams is a Welsh name. I said, well, what it is I'm half Japanese. Oh, you're half Japanese. Okay, yeah. What half? Well, my mother was Japanese. My father was an American. But I was adopted out of an orphanage in Japan. So then the other side attorney jumped up and says, this is not fair, Your Honor. The opposite side is throwing widows and orphans at me.
Uh, sometimes you
So
just
that just,
gotta break the tension a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah. And so that just told me that it's not all serious. It is serious, but there is
Sure.
some levity of it. And so, which then allowed me to be a little bit more relaxed in my
Mm,
testimony. Because before then, I think I was very stiff because this is early in my career. And I think I was too stiff. And so you got to project yourself as just another human being, just like
mm,
you in the jury. I'm a person with feelings and emotions and things of that sort, and I'm not this just talking head. That I am a person, and so I've learned from that incident that it's okay to do a little joke. Just don't be disrespectful
sure.
of the situation or anybody, and don't do any of the bad things that people say about each other. Just make sure you don't do that. But that was a turning point in my career in terms of loosening up. So sometimes you don't have to be a Brooks Brothers suit, right? You can maybe be a sports jacket. Like I'm going to go to Tennessee to a trial. All right, I'm not going to go in my suit. I have a nice, custom made suit. I'm going to go in a nice shirt, dress shirt, nice slacks, and a nice a sports coat. Not loud, but a nice sports coat because they're not as formal, I guess, as they're than let's say Los Angeles or San Francisco or something like that. And so you don't want to come across as obviously that guy's from New York, that
Mm,
expert. Look at the way
right.
he's dressed. No, but be respectful, but don't overdress to the point that you're obviously an expert for hire, because that's what they'll say. They'll kind of insinuate that because the way you dressed. They'll
Sure.
say things. They'll say nasty things like, "Oh, that's a nice suit. Did you get that from Brooks Brothers?" Or some crap like that. They'll say.
One thing I'd like to ask you before we wrap up, there's two types of expert witnesses. There's ones that are primarily engaged in consulting witnesses that aren't really going to take the stand. They're not going to be cross-examined. And then there are obviously testifying witnesses. You've done both. Do you have a preference?
Well, a lot of people don't realize that there is, like you say, a difference between a consulting expert and a testifying one. The main thing is that you're going to imagine that the testifying expert, which I've done most of the time as a testifying, all my stuff, emails, scribblings, are all discoverable. A consulting one is not discoverable. Their work
Mm,
is not discoverable. All right. So I can be more free in my conversation and my emails back and forth to my consulting one because that's not discoverable, right? But because that's information that's privileged to my side or my attorneys. So if you be stifled in your action because of the of a possible being under discovery and have to divulge all this stuff, you can be a little bit more free to your discussions and correspondence and knocking off ideas back and forth to your consulting expert. So I have had it, but I make sure that all the confidentiality is preserved, regardless of if you're the testifying or the consulting expert, because you don't know what may be harmful to your case that goes on because you may have just thrown it out as a hypothesis and find out that's not a good hypothesis.
right.
So, so you got to keep everything under confidentiality agreement, just because I've had it where that I've heard of it where the testifying expert was not able to testify for illness. And guess who had to become the testifying expert, the consulting expert? Because they had to get someone to be able to talk about it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had somebody to be able to talk about it. So they amended their motion and said that this is now our testifying expert instead of just our consulting expert. So you
Wow.
got to be prepared. Got to be prepared.
Do you have any last advice before we wrap up, either for newer expert witnesses or for attorneys that work with expert witnesses?
Well, first of all, it ain't going to be the same as a consulting engineer. Just let you know. For instance, I've had cases drag out 2 or 3 years. Right? You
Wow.
would not hear from your attorney for 3 months, 6 months. Then come out and say we need something next week. Right? And then you're trying to remember what the heck did I do on that case? And so that's really tough to do. It's very stressful because you can't just do a regular walkthrough like a regular project. You got to tiptoe your way through and be very, very careful of who you talk to. Like my wife, I can't talk to her about stuff. You're not supposed to, or your girlfriend, or your colleague, or your pastor, your minister. You cannot talk to anybody about your case. You got to understand that. And so that sometimes kind of festers inside you, and you want to get it out because you want to say, "Hey, I'm working on this thing, and it's a high visibility type of stuff." And so also beware of the stress. As I pointed out earlier, before we talked, Noah, that I had a friend that got into it, thought he was going to make a ton of money and being an expert witness, had to quit within a year because he couldn't handle the stress, lost all his hair in a matter of 6 months into this case. And he found breaking out in hives. He was having heart palpitations, all those type of things because he could not handle the stress. So the stress, the hurry up and wait, like when I was in the Army, a lot of hurry up and wait, and then also be wearing a thick skin. Those are the things. Those are my, quote, pearls of wisdom. Be a thick-skinned person.
Sage advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me, Noah.
Absolutely. And thank you to our listeners for joining me for another discussion at the Roundtable. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening apps.